I think one of the major issues with people, and not just women, and certainly not just people with disabilities, just in general,
Mm.
is that lack of self-belief and confidence um, in doing things. So I speak to people all the time about this, and they say, "Oh, I would like to do this, but I'm worried about if it doesn't work out, or I'm worried about what people will think of me. I'm worried that I might not be good at it."
Oh, that's a good one. Different culture, different ideologies.
Mental health is really important.
Be like I was in my 30s, and I had exuberant energy.
Definitely be more introspective and be brave in looking.
Because I was so consumed by my own suffering and being an alcoholic, in my opinion.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Strong, Happy, Healthy, Loved podcast. I'm your host, John, where we're talking to our guests about their journeys in this realm, about their mental health, the trials and tribulations, the things that have shaped their experiences. And sometimes the suffering is part of that growth and learning. And I'm very honored and privileged today to be joined by Brooke Strahan, a self-confessed outdoor enthusiast who has an incredible journey that we're going to get a chance to talk to about today, from physical challenges from birth and stepping into a world of martial arts, of the security industry, the Australian Defence Force, as running triathlons, a writer of books, columnist, you name it. I don't think there's something she hasn't scratched the surface on. So welcome, Brooke.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. We had a little chat beforehand, and already you're into this sense of not even really acknowledging how amazing that you are. It's like, yeah, well, that's just me and that's just what I do. So it's quite interesting to each person has their own kind of sense of self-awareness, and seemingly you needed to develop that very quickly in your life
Oh,
too.
yeah, no, absolutely. I always say to people that I think it's really important to develop a sense of self and a strong sense of self.
Yeah. So to get us started, I'd like you to cast your mind back to those early years, those formative years where you did have those physical challenges, and that would counted for some bullying and having your parents to kind of keep you grounded. Please, please share your origins.
Yeah, well, basically, I'm born like a late, I guess they call us like a late generation Xer, so kind of on the cusp of being Generation X, just going into millennial, um, and so like then, as we know, for anyone who's Generation X and beforehand, it's uh, things were done a little bit differently. And there was a bit of a mindset that basically you were expected as a child to just pretty much tough things out, regardless of who you were, or what you had. There's that joke that goes around and by a lot of Generation X's, and they say, "Oh, I died twice, and my mum told me just to walk it off."
Yeah.
It didn't quite happen to me. I was told to walk things off a lot, that's for sure. So I think as we all were. And so, in terms of me with my condition, I was certainly not model codied
Mm.
as a child.
And just for context, if you can talk about what that condition is, please.
Yeah, so my condition that I was born with is a connective tissue disorder. And the two most common connective tissue disorders are Marfan's syndrome and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, otherwise known as EDS. Both are highly complicated conditions. Both are seen as rare, however, probably not as rare as what the medical professionals first thought. And there's been a lot of quite a bit of papers and discussion around that lately in the medical world. But both are incurable as well. So they just they can just be managed, and being a complicated condition involving connective tissues means that they can affect all different parts of the body. And there's different types of EDS, just meaning that your type will be based on what your most predominant symptom is. So pretty much where the connective tissues are affected the most obvious, they'll class you as having that type of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. However, that doesn't mean it's your only symptom, because as I said, they affect connective tissues throughout the body. And each person who has these conditions, none of us will look the same. We will all present differently and at different levels.
Yeah. Because like the sticky tape, right? Your connective tissue. So it means your muscles have to work overtime. Like I know you're in pain.
Yeah. So with me, I have what's known as hypermobility EDS. It used to be known by the medical professionals as class 3. And that's because the connective tissues, which is actually the sticky tape, in my joints, they're not how they should be.
Yeah.
So they're not functioning. My body doesn't produce collagen how it should. And so basically that makes me very double jointed, for the layman's term. People throw around that term when they're not too sure what it is, or they don't quite understand hypermobility. So the joints are basically loose and unstable. And that is my main symptom, but it's not my only symptom, right? Because as I said, it affects connective tissues. So I have many other things going on with my body as well.
So you were saying growing up, it was particularly your speech was affected, and that.
Yeah. So that was one of the hardest symptoms for me, in terms of how it affected me as a child and as a teenager, was that I had a speech impediment. So not everyone with connective tissue disorders have speech impediments. It depends if the connective tissues in the mouth are affected and how they're affected.
Yeah.
But I have a very small jaw, which is common for EDS and also for those with Marfan syndrome. So a very small jaw meant that the teeth don't all fit in. So you get the overcrowding of the teeth, which then leads to, dental procedures. And I've had braces twice.
Wow.
So braces once as a teenager, braces as an adult as well at 29 years of age. I had them again. A number of teeth extractions. So to make room for the teeth that they kept in my mouth. But it affects the connective tissues in the palate and the tongue. And hence, that's why you can end up with a speech impediment. So I certainly had one, and it is, EDS is hereditary. So it runs down my mother's line. And so there's speech impediments down her line. Because of the speech impediment, I was put into speech therapy at a very young age. So basically, pretty much once they realised, Brooke's got a pretty severe speech impediment, I was put into speech therapy, thank goodness. And I had that during my childhood and into my teenage years as well. And I still had the speech impediment in my mid-teens. So it had improved, but it was still there, despite having all the dental work and braces and all the speech therapy. So during that whole time, that I became like an obvious target for bullies, just based on that alone. And because people didn't understand that I had a disability, like children, because it was something that, is not well known. And even though I had some different symptoms, it wasn't like it was some major physical disability where it was really obvious. And so they didn't understand what was wrong with me or why I spoke or moved, which we can talk about soon, the way I did. So yeah, it just became that target.
And we know kids are very cruel, though, that bastion of fire, you're going to get picked on for your weight or your ears or your hair color, and seemingly yours was
Yeah,
something.
absolutely. You can be perfect and they would find something to pick on. There's plenty of people with stories of being bullied for absolutely no reason. They had nothing. Yet other kids found something. But for me, like they didn't have to look very far to find something.
Did that start to develop a certain, inner world? Did that drive that started to turn over, or was there an outlet that you had back then? I know your family was extremely supportive and didn't, like we said, did wrap you up in cotton wool and sort of go, okay, well, they just kept you as you, which is
Yeah,
good.
yeah, certainly. It really built up a resilience.
Mm,
Like for me, I didn't go into a shell really at all. Quite the opposite. Um, and in my late teens, I went into vocal training, so essentially singing lessons.
yeah.
And I could not sing, and I was not musical. But I was put into the vocal training,
Mm,
and that is probably what helped my speech impediment the most at that stage. And I highly recommend to people who have a speech impediment, apart from speech therapy or speech pathology, that they do singing lessons
yeah.
because of how much it helped me. And with that obviously brought a level of confidence as well, because suddenly I'm using my voice in public.
Yeah.
And I think that was the catalyst for me developing confidence of speaking in public and performing, because at that stage I thought, well, if I can perform in public,
Yes.
then I can speak in public, because performing, that's much more daunting.
Terrifying for some people, right? Yeah.
Terrifying than speaking. So I developed a confidence of, hey, I can do this. There's nothing holding me back, because if I can get up on stage and with a guitar and sing even when I'm not very good and get away with it.
Well, that feeling of confidence that you're
Yeah.
breaking through some of those barriers, and especially when you're the person who doesn't speak very well, and yet now you're singing clearly
Mm.
and succinctly, and yeah, incredible.
Yeah. 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 So I think for me that was really the start of gaining a level of confidence and owning, learning about owning yourself, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean by that. Mm.
Perfect. And just as well, your parents had, they were hard workers, obviously. I think your mum said you had a hobby farm, so you were used to getting up in the morning and having chores, and you weren't just like in suburbia and things like that, correct?
Originally, when I was very young, we were on a farm.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, and it was a very outdoors lifestyle. So I think that's why I was so physical from the get-go. And my parents were very athletic, especially my mother,
Okay.
very sporty. And other family members also like very sporty and athletic. And the school I went to was a very small country school, and they had a real uh, focus on sport
Yeah.
and PT. And so it was just part of my life, like to be sporty, athletic, and run around with everyone,
Mm.
regardless of me having mobility issues. And for the listeners, it wasn't my mobility issues is not that I can't do things, it's that I look different when I do them. So it's my form. So, for example, my running form is different to others' running form, but I can most certainly run.
Yeah.
And I used to be quite fast. I actually used to win quite a lot of athletic competitions,
Yeah.
cross country, other athletic events, or do well in them. I played representative basketball.
Okay.
Yeah. My family is very much into basketball, and my mother is a good basketballer, and my aunts. Um, and and so, as I said, like I could always do things, I just did them differently.
Yeah. Which seems to be the theme of your life, as we keep the listeners acknowledge that. So obviously, this physicality continued. I know you got into a bit of martial arts, a screamer, and then you stepped into the world of security. So please kind of explain how that kind of trends
Yeah,
unfolded.
well, basically, that was brought on by the gentleman I was seeing. I was only 18 and he was 18 as well. So my boyfriend at that time, um, he was a boxer and martial artist, and he introduced me to eskrima, or as I say, I refer to it more as arnis kali. So for the listeners, it's traditional Filipino martial arts and Filipino stick fighting. Um, and I just kind of took to it. Um, and and I'm not too sure why that was that I took to it so easily. Um, but I think a lot of it had to do with I must have had some aggression that had been suppressed,
I'm sure, yes.
and I was suddenly able to release have a form to release it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I really enjoyed it, and I still enjoy that form of martial arts, and also it suited my body and what my body is capable of doing, because martial arts which involve high kicks, etc., are really not suitable with my condition. Um, where that form of martial arts was much more suited to me.
Mm. Yeah, so you find those forms to support. I mean, obviously, I think you're the instructor was saying, this controlled aggression that you suddenly found that was part of your inner system that you'd been developing over time. And like I said, I'm sure that all of those the taunts and things that being picked on, that you just had this resolve that just needed a way to express itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it also, I also found out at that time that I was stronger
Okay.
than I guess a woman of my age, of my size. Because for the listeners, I'm tall, but I'm very slight. And because I have a marfanoid body shape, that's what they call it. So that's common to people with connective tissue disorders. Not everyone with EDS has a marfanoid body shape, but a lot do. And of course, people with Marfan syndromes do. So it's basically where your limbs are very long. So long fingers, long arms, long legs, long toes, long neck, etc. Um, and I had this Marfanoid body shape, but because I had maintained such a physical, active lifestyle during my childhood and teenage years, and then going into young adulthood, what had happened, which I didn't realize was happening, was that my muscles were overcompensating for my joint hypermobility, for my instability. So they're working all the time in overtime and drive. And that had made them very strong. And it wasn't until I was put literally into, martial arts and later defensive tactics training, and I'm up against men, that I realized how strong I was.
Yeah, interesting.
Mm.
And so that sort of led you into the world. Your boyfriend at the time was in security, and you sort of stepped in. Now I know it. I started with my sister back in the early '90s, and there was no female guards around. And then once they were introduced, it was a whole new ball game because guys didn't know how to handle. And I think you used some quite well tactics. Excuse me, can you come with me? And they're like, oh, sure. And the next minute they're outside, you're like, bye, and walk back in again. So I mean, it's a good ploy sometimes to have those feminine wiles to utilize because obviously, probably where you were as well, it was a an anomaly. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. When I started, there wasn't very many. There was only a few female security officers and guards, especially doing bouncing
yeah,
work and crowd control work. That's not the only type of security work I did, but I certainly did quite a lot of that. Because they just always needed. There was always a job, in that role. Um, and and
those years were
yeah,
very physical, right? There was a lot of violence and a lot of drunkenness and learning
back
to
then
negotiate. Yeah,
back then
yeah.
it was it was different to how it is these days. Like the club scene was huge and the pub scene and yeah, it's there was laws in place, but they weren't as strict, and people got into fights all the time
It
in
wasn't like
pubs.
when it was happened, it was like how many, and then obviously, you're in it. You can't just stand back and expect your male colleagues to do the work. I'm sure you were in there.
Oh, I was always in there.
Yeah.
I was always in there. Yeah, yeah. Which, yeah, I didn't think twice about it. Sometimes I look back at it and go, "Wowzers!" But, but that was me. That was me back then. I just, yeah, I just thought, well, I got a job to do, and I'm here to do it as well as the guys.
Yeah.
So I never thought I was compromising anyone else's safety by me going in, and I never did.
I
I
think
always
you were
came.
saying one time a male tried to pull you out thinking he was trying to support you, and you're like, hang on, I'm doing my job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I only had that happen the once though.
Yeah. I
Most of
mean,
the times they didn't mind at all. So
and it's interesting too, up until, fairly recently, I mean, your speech was such, and I mean, obviously part of the role as well is to communicate effectively and talk people down. And so obviously you're talking and physically involved, all the things that potentially you're not necessarily geared up for. So it must have been this sort of accelerated learning process that now you had to trust your body and trust your speech and make sure that you were gaining this foundation that was going to support you moving forward.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I worked with some really good people during that time as well, and some really experienced officers and guards who uh, taught me who taught me a lot and were really supportive and backed me up a lot as well. Well, I could see how they spoke and what they did, and learned a lot from them. So, and I was fortunate to experience lots of different types of security roles. So not always those really physical, confrontational ones. I also, front of house type, security concierge type roles as well. Um, so, the broad spectrum, as well as close personal protection too. So I done a close personal protection course. So that as well
Mm,
exposed me to a different type of environment and a different type of operating procedure too.
yeah. And it teaches you obviously from basketball, there's a lot of peripheral vision and security is very situational awareness. I'm sure you were well geared up for environmental, awareness of looking after people, and you probably knew what was going to happen before it was going to happen. Sometimes it becomes that intuitive, when you're in those roles.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you certainly try. Obviously, we can't always see everything, but
Mm,
um, uh, an officer who's doing their job is, always on the lookout. They always, even if they look like they're just standing there doing nothing, us who know that they're there, that they're watching, even if they don't, even if, and they probably know exactly what's happening, even if people think they're just standing there doing nothing. Mm.
And I found in my situation, sometimes you have a critical eye when it's was usually placed on me that I was always looking to improve and find ways. And if you put that outwardly, then you can see all the problems. You can see all the areas that need improvement. Did you find potentially because of all the challenges you had that you were very well geared up for going into situations that you were well equipped for?
Um, and I think more came into play a little bit later, more in my life. Um, when we're talking about situational awareness and having a critical eye, because I later went into risk management and consulting on risk management. And so I think, well, I must have learned a fair bit of that during my security work, because I certainly later on, it became, I went into that professional role of being a consultant, and walking literally into buildings and workplaces and different, working environments, and going this, that, this.
Yeah, fire exits,
all the things that
extinguishers,
everything
yeah.
I could see that needed attention in terms of for safety, risk management, emergency management, that type of area of workplace health and safety.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm sure those skills must have originally developed from the very beginning, from my security work.
Yeah. And even earlier, isn't it? Under the unconscious bias that we're sort of predicated towards, early in life. So, and then you managed to get yourself into the Australian Defence Force, which I think is incredible in itself. That I'm sure the recruiters saw the way you moved and was like, well, she's doing it, she's passing the test. But did that come under scrutiny at all in the early stages?
Uh, it's one of those things where I still don't know really how I got in. And to be honest, I should have never have joined. Um, like, and my family, I'm not going to blame my family, but truthfully, my family probably should have said, Brooke, it's not for you. You have a medical condition and that's going to be a problem. But no one said that to me.
Yeah.
No one told me that I shouldn't go in or that I couldn't do this.
I probably wouldn't dare.
I don't know. And the thing is that in the medical, because connective tissue disorders, well, in all honest truth, even now, I've never had a medical form where they ask about your medical history.
All right.
On not one medical form has there been a question, do you have a connective tissue disorder?
True.
So basically, right, I ticked all the, answers to everything on the medical. The fact I had a connective tissue disorder was not on there.
Yep.
Was not on there.
Don't ask, don't tell. Yeah.
Yep. Right. And then when I went in for my medical, well, I could pass everything. Connective tissue disorders don't show up in bloods or anything like that, and they just looked at me and just thought I medically checked out fine. And then when it came to the fitness testing, I still blows my mind that they didn't ask me why I was running the way I did.
Yeah.
Or what was wrong with my legs or why I moved the way I did. At no point in time during the recruiting process was I asked that.
No.
And as I said earlier, it's not that I can't do things, it's just that I move differently. So I could pass all the fitness, but I'm sure I look different. I think maybe they just needed people.
Maybe, yeah.
I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure if the recruiters just turned a blind eye to it. I don't know.
Well, around that
Uh,
time, wasn't it? I think Timor was in play, so potentially.
Timor had just broken out. Yeah, yeah, that's correct. Timor had just broken out. Yeah. Um, but it certainly became an issue. So, um, because it was one of those things where I didn't realize how much it affected some other areas of me physically.
Yeah.
So even though I, could pass all basic fitness, it's not until I'm put under pressure to do things like, example, with my hands, um, that I realized that my condition was affecting my fine motor skills, which it does. And I mean, I had known it had affected my fine motor skills because the way I write is different, and that had always been an issue during school. When I grew up, people were still being corrected if you held your pen,
Yes.
the wrong way. Yeah. And it wasn't so much that I even held my pen the wrong way, is that when I write, and I'm predominantly right-handed, when I write, I have what they describe as like a swan hand or swan wrist. So I'm holding my pen or pencil correctly, but my arm placement and wrist placement is not how it should be. And that's because my wrist is so hypermobile.
Right.
Yeah. So I look like, when you see left-handers, right?
I'm a
How it looks
left-hander,
awkward.
so
Yeah. So how you sweep it around?
yeah.
You sweep it around?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do that as a right-handed person.
Okay.
And that's because I have to do it that way to support my wrist.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really difficult for me to try and write like a standard right-handed person would in that standard position. So I knew that that obviously it wasn't just the hypermobility wasn't just through my legs, because it like the legs was the most obvious. I knew that I had it elsewhere, but I didn't realize how bad it was in through my hands and fingers until I'm having to do things at speed and up against people all at the same time, and I'm struggling, and no one knows why I'm struggling, and I'm getting called a spastic, or they think I'm dumb because I can't do it, or I can't do it fast enough.
Yeah.
But really, it's because my fingertips are hypermobile and they're flexing the wrong way. So, for example, even now, obviously it doesn't get better, a simple motion of pressing a button. So if I have to press a button, I often have to press it a couple of times before it works, because normally when you press a button, you would have a forward force through your fingertip. My fingertip flexes back.
So everything. Yeah. So you're not even having to worry about the fingertips and then your hand and then your elbow and so it's obviously a multiple series of adjustments just to get one thing. Yeah, incredible.
Yeah. So, and as I said, it wasn't until I was put in that position where I'm having to do things like bang, 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 everything's so urgent and fast. And you're against people that, it's been realized that there's issues, that there's issues, with the mobility, apart from the obvious, the obvious issue, like with the running style, etc. Yeah. So long story short, I ended up being medically discharged. And even then, I was still masking the condition, like to most people, and to future employees. There still wasn't a level of acceptance that I actually had a disability and I should talk about it and I should let people know. And when I go for jobs, I should let them know that I've got this happening. I still wasn't at a level of acceptance at that stage.
I guess it's that counterintuitive that you don't want to be given the role based on special preferences or that someone feels potentially sorry for you, that you want to get it on the merits. So yeah, it's
Yeah, I also thought maybe at that stage it might not play in my favor because also back then it's not like now where it's diversity. Let's employ somebody who's diverse, and that's a good thing. Even back then, because I'm still talking like 20 so years ago. Yeah, I didn't think it was going to play in my favor at all.
okay.
I thought it would probably play against me. I just didn't want to be seen as being different
Yeah.
or having something wrong with me. So I really, when I got jobs and went for jobs, I still wasn't declaring it and I wasn't telling anyone about it. And then if it got pointed out, especially like I said, like they'd see me run or just the way I moved or something, and it got pointed out, I'd just kind of laugh it off.
Yeah.
You know, I'll say, oh yeah, I've just always ran like that. Oh yeah, that's just the way I am. Yeah, like once again, that real masking.
It's interesting now. I'm sure where you were then and to get through the recruitment of the ADF to work security. I mean, you've kind of gained all these skills and through no fault of saying, hey, I've got a disability. Whereas I think they're saying now it's almost like supported and let's see what we can do with that. So I mean, you're a real kind of, I'm not saying trendsetter, but you're breaking through a lot of those stigmas that if people had a known, right, then it may or may not have been different. But I guess for you, your whole life's been a test from the time you were born that you wanted to find your own way. And as you've said, you didn't know any differently. So it's not
Mm,
like you had to adjust. You just had to keep finding ways to move forward and see what you could do.
mm.
And then I mean that after the you went into these corporate sector jobs, but then I heard you also went in and got a role as a journalist. You saw that you were able to potentially do some writing, and please how that kind of came about of you just dropping into a newspaper columnist.
Yeah, so that was only a part-time role. I was still working a full-time job, but yes, there was an opportunity to write a column and for a newspaper, and I had no journalistic background, but I knew I could write. I kind of always known I could write, and I'd always been a creative person. I was very good at art. So as a child, I was put into private art tuition as a child. Um, so I knew I had a creative flair, and I submitted an example of my writing to the editor, and I got the job.
Right.
So
Amazing.
so as I said, it was only just once a week column, so it was just a part-time thing. But that's really where my professional writing
Hmm.
began, and after that, after I moved and the different things out of that area, I I used to do a little bit of professional writing. For different places I've worked, they would ask, "Oh, Brooke, can you write this article, like for Business Weekly or something like that, or certain reports, etc." Because they just knew that I had good writing skills. My reports, etc., were high level, and so I was doing that, and I wasn't, but certainly not doing any creative writing at all. And it wasn't until around 2016 that an idea for a book came into my head. And at that stage, I didn't even know it was a book. I didn't know what it was. All I knew was that I had what was basically a movie
Yep.
playing out in my brain. And there were characters and there was monologue and it wouldn't go away.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. And I thought, what is this? Am I going crazy? Who are these people? and and then I that's when I realized I had a book. And I went, okay, obviously this isn't going away. I need to start writing this. And hence the subject,
Yeah.
what's known as the subject series, now the subject trilogy. That's how that began.
And that's due. Is that out now? The new combined? Because I know you put the three stories into one. Is
I have put the three stories into one. So yeah, the first book was actually released quite quickly. It was a 2017 release, the subject. So it's an Australian psychological thriller with a female protagonist who is an anti-hero.
yeah.
So her name is Bianca Beretta. So she's Australian of Italian heritage, hence Beretta being the last name and Bianca being her first name. But as I said, she is an anti-hero. So like most good anti-hero, it's an oxymoron. But she's very likable. So she's very likable, but she is not essentially a very good person. But she goes through a series of events during the series, and basically it's an entanglement of web and a web of deception and manipulation with a bit of a government conspiracy thrown in there as well, and a few other good plot lines and plot twists. But yes, the first book was the subject, and then after that, I released the subject 2, Fade, and then I wrote the subject 3, 4, and that's when it was decided to put them together as what's known as an anthology. So it's titled the Subject Trilogy. So it's a one book with all 3 books inside it.
And any thoughts to turn that into a film or a TV series? Has there been any
well, a screen. I am allowed to talk about this. Yes, so a screenplay has been written. So a screenplay has been adapted from the novel series, The Subject, and very excited about that. So I certainly didn't write the screenplay. It was picked up by Guerrilla Entertainment, and they've done a wonderful role in doing the adaptation of the novel series. And yeah, we just got to watch this space.
Beautiful.
So exciting.
Yeah, everything else you've done it has transformed itself into reality. So I have no doubt moving forward. I mean, interesting looking at the characters and being in the film industry myself. It's like a lot of the characters we get to play. I certainly wouldn't be that in my own life, but it's an extension. Do you feel that this Bianca character potentially is part of this inner dark world that you've secretly thought about, all these risk assessments and things you might have done, all these things clicking into play? Is Bianca close to you?
Oh, look, people always ask, oh, is Bianca you? And I'm like, no, Bianca's not me. But of course, there's little parts of me in her. Like I would never want to be Bianca. She's horrible, but she's likable. But there's certain traits of her which are definitely, and and a lot of what she does comes from my own skill set.
Yeah.
You can, they say that writers write what they know. So we write what we know, and then we throw in a whole heap of other stuff to make it a bit more Hollywood, and a bit more appealing. Yeah, but I say to people that all the characters have parts of me, in them. You can't kind of help but do that, and parts of lots of other people I know as well in them.
Yeah. Interesting. And I know part of your upbringing too, my sister was part of June Delhi Watkins, and when you mentioned it, I was kind of like, oh wow, yeah, there's those finishing schools or etiquette schools for females. They're sort of gone by the wayside now. I mean, obviously everybody's online and doing things, but I think back then, I mean, that was kind of the prestige of stepping into these worlds, of learning how to conduct yourself well? I mean, did that sort of serve a good purpose at that time for more poise and how to carry yourself? And
Yeah, most certainly. So I'd always had an interest in modeling, because I had some family members who had modeled, um, and but essentially I was tall, and I was influenced by people who would meet me, and they'd say, "Oh, you should be a model." You know, that, like, you know, being told that as a little girl, you start going, "Oh, maybe I can be." And yeah, and I think they just used to say that because yeah, I had that body shape. Just off to the side, a lot of research has been done with EDS, and there's some papers that talk about the fact that many models, dancers, and actors have connective tissue disorders.
oh,
Yeah, because of varying levels, because they often have a marfanoid body shape.
yeah.
So those people often have underlying connective tissue disorders that they may or may not be aware of. Um, but yeah, so I had that body shape, and so I got interested in it. And yes, and June Daly Watkins was still alive then, which is a lovely lady. She was Australia's first supermodel, for those who listeners who don't know who she is. And she had her own modeling agencies and finishing schools. And yeah, so I went through that. And I think that also helped with my confidence as well, and presenting myself in front of people and speaking in front of people too, even at the young age, because I still had a speech impediment when I went through that.
Okay.
But I was treated no differently. I remember in that course, I was treated no differently whatsoever, and made to speak and made to do all the things that everyone else was. Mm.
Yeah, and you probably found stepping into some of these worlds, you know, you were supported in the security industry. They wanted to support you, and the ADF, they probably wanted to bring you up. And again, with this type of modeling, when you're around your kind of type of tribe, that everybody wants to see you succeed, and not necessarily pull you down.
No, no, like I definitely wasn't pulled down. Yeah, in that world,
Mm.
really, really whatsoever. It it wasn't probably until a little bit later, because I modeled on and off pretty much my whole life as well. Just casually or part time, and a few times I know I got pulled up, like, for my walk in, and that's EDS related, because it affects the way I walk, and kind of questioning about my walk in.
Mm.
But more recently, because I've been heavily involved with horse racing fashion and
Okay.
fashions on the field, and I think that kind of stemmed from the modeling thing. I entered a competition, like a fashions on the field competition, randomly, at a horse race meet, and did well. And then, as it so happens, nearly all the girls who do it say the same thing. You win one, and then you start getting a bit obsessed, and
Yeah.
and so that seemed to happen to me. And it wasn't really. I wasn't really aware of it until I was told, by some other competitors, that there were people commenting about the way I walked on stage,
Yeah.
or essentially making fun of the way
Mhm.
that I walked on stage, when I was on the fashions on the field stage. Um, and and back then I wasn't talking. I still really wasn't talking about my condition. So after that, I think that was one part of my, I guess, unmasking as
Mhm.
well, where I went, well, I walk like that because I've got a medical condition. And
Yeah.
when I started telling people that, they were like, oh, okay, we didn't realize, like, you had that. I'm like, yeah, yeah. And it and that's why now I tell everyone.
Well, it's okay to pick on someone because they look different, but as soon as you find out why they're different, oh well, that's it. It's funny, isn't it, that people will change
Yeah,
Now
Yeah.
you're guilty of, oh my God, I can't believe I shamed someone who's got a
Yeah.
disability. Yeah.
And that happens all the time with me. People will comment about things, or the way I run or something. And now, instead of laughing it off, I say, well, actually, I have a connective tissue disorder and it affects my mobility. And they say, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize. And I don't never say it to them, but I always think in my head, well, you shouldn't have said it in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, if it was obvious that I had it, let's say I had cerebral palsy and it was more obvious, like, so you looked at somebody and went, okay, they move differently because obviously they got cerebral palsy, then the chances of them saying something to them about the way they walk or, would be very minimal. Hardly anyone would ever do that.
Yeah.
So, and it's like, just because you didn't know that I didn't have what I had doesn't make it right. Right. If I'm walking or moving differently, there's obviously a reason for it.
Yeah, I guess for some people it's still that ignorance or I'm uncomfortable with it, so I'll make a joke about it. But really we see that there's kindness and support for all of us in whatever we do. And we just don't know that somebody's going through life and we judge them because of our own ignorance. But so yeah, I mean, amazing to think you've stepped into all these worlds and like the Midas touch, seemingly everything you've touched sort of turns to this gold, and you're like, do you get to the point where you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I might try something else? Are you constantly a person who likes new developments or gets bored with the old?
Oh, I constantly. It's always like, now I'm doing this. What are we going to do next? Oh, and it's not that I'm like some people say about the Midas touch. I've had other people say that to me as well, and I think no, not necessarily. It's just that I give things a go, and sometimes I'm good at them, and sometimes I'm not. But the difference is I don't really care either way. Even if I'm not good at it, I'll still do it. Example, triathlons. I'm terrible. I'm slow. I can barely ride a bike, but I do them anyway.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that you give it a go, just to try it out and see how, the fact that you're dealing with this perception of the physicality, that it's one thing where so-called people with all the normal functions try to do it and they struggle with fitness or whatever, but you're actually dealing with talking to the parts of your body, making, and you're saying your hips can go, your knee can go, your things can just go out without you knowing about it. I mean, that's obviously a part on the back of your mind that could be quite damaging as well.
Yeah, it's funny because even though I know that I can have subluxations, I'm lucky that I don't have the dislocations very often. Like people with my condition, a lot of them have major dislocations continuously, and that's why they don't do physical activity. But even though my level of hypermobility is so high, I don't tend to have the dislocations. And maybe that's because of my muscles being so strong, being so active from a child. But I certainly have subluxation. So I can just like go over, if that makes sense. So I could be walking and my ankle just kind of goes and I go off to the side. Similar, like if you watched a woman in high heels walking and she kind of, it kind of goes out from under her.
Yeah.
How you see that? That could happen to me, but that can happen to me just with bare feet. Yeah, but I'm very fortunate. I don't have to get the major dislocations. But it's something that I really don't think about because, like I said, as a child, I wasn't model coddied and I just did it anyway. So I rarely think about, oh, this could do this to me. Because I don't like living in that world of what if, because, example, my neck is very hypermobile. And some people with my level of hypermobility in regards to their neck get around in a neck brace all the time because they're worried their neck's going to go out. And some people, there's even chances of like what they call an internal decapitation, like the neck's slipping out that much. But I think I'm not going to get around in a neck brace, my whole life. Like my neck slips out a little bit here and there, and I get it treated with chiropractic. So I'm regularly at the chiropractor getting my neck put back in. But I'm not walking around in a neck brace continuously, certainly not at this stage, where I know there's other people who have the same, basically the same neck as me, and they're getting around in a neck brace all the time. But for me, that's just not me. Yeah. I just don't worry that much. And the same with bracing in general. I've got all different types of bracing for my body, and I wear it as I feel it's required. And sometimes I wear it when training, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I wear it when racing, like in triathlons, sometimes I don't. And I haven't worn all my bracing the last couple of triathlons, and my PB, I beat my personal best by 10 minutes the first time I didn't put on all my bracing.
Amazing. Yeah.
And that's because of the time basically it takes for me in the transitions to put it all on, muck around with it all. Yeah. Because I can't wear it all in the water. So
yeah, well, that's part of it too, isn't it? The swimming and the cycling and
yeah.
it all adds up, doesn't it? I mean, you're at the point now, seemingly physicality is always going to be a part of your world. And obviously there's a time when you're not going to be able to push yourself. That mental transition that you pretty much mentioned, there's pain every day. You get headaches. And seemingly you're not the sort of person who's just going to play the victim and give up. You're always going to keep pushing yourself. Do you find yourself now, what kind of support mechanisms do you bring in? I mean, is diet important? Is the mental focus important? I mean, all those factors do you need now to get sorted every day? Is there a bit of a ritual?
Yeah. I think the treatment with my condition is basically it's holistic. It's a holistic approach, but it's also an individual approach, if that makes sense. So, example, yes, like the headaches is one of the main pain symptoms I have. And they will be every day, all day, if I don't get my neck treated. So, so that's why I go to the chiropractor, and he adjusts my neck and he adjusts other parts of my body, including like my hips and my back, which really helps. And I generally go every few weeks. If I'm having flare ups, I might go, every 2 weeks or so. I get pain in my legs, particularly. I get pain all throughout my body, but my legs particularly. Like heavy feeling legs, dead legs, sore, tired legs, and I treat them with heat. Okay. I find that the heat really helps. Also massage, so massage throughout like the whole body, because a lot of the pain derives from the fact that my muscles are so tight. So we spoke about how they're working overtime. So even if I'm not doing anything physical, even just walking around the house is utilizing all these muscles a lot more than it would for somebody without the condition.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I can get to that delayed onset muscle soreness, isn't it? If you do a workout the next day, you're sore, but potentially you're in that constantly. Your body's always
exactly. That's how I describe it to people. I say, well, if you're worked out, you get sore, right? And they go, yeah. And I go, well, that's me all the time. But once again, I don't kind of know any different. It's just that sometimes it's a little bit worse than other times. But certainly when I get massages, like they just touch me quite lightly, and it is so painful because it feels like bruising throughout my whole body. Yeah. At the same time, it kind of feels good too. It's great. It's great them getting into those knots, but it's extremely painful for me too. But it has to be done. And there's other symptoms where I just get random flare-ups. And how things flare up can be so varied. There's never one particular type of area that could flare up, or one type of particular type of pain. Sometimes it can be like a nerve pain flare up. Other times I get something that comes and goes very quickly, and the only way I can describe it is though it feels like my muscle is cracking. I'll walk, and it will be at the back of my thigh, the back of my leg, and it will debilitate me. I'll grab the back of my leg and be like, "What was that?" And then it just kind of goes. Yeah, but I've spoken with other people with this condition, and they say, yeah, just random pains that can come, but then go as quickly as they came.
I mean, we have enough in our lives to deal with, let alone random sicknesses that just pop up and just go away. And oh well, that's yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just so used to it, even though I still go, what was that? It's like, oh well, just the body just doing something.
You can't even really focus each day. I guess you just take it as it shows up, and without knowing, you might have to.
It doesn't freak me out. Like if somebody without the condition suddenly got it, they'd probably be like, "Oh my goodness!" Like where I'm just kind of like, "Oh yeah, it's just a flare up." But also just maintaining being very physical for me is the best. Like as other people with EDS, they're not very physical at all. But and each to their own. Why they are or not, I don't know. I don't know their condition or what's happening with them. As I said, they might get dislocations all the time, and that's why. But for me, I have a physical lifestyle even without doing any triathlon training or sports, because I'm on a farm and I get up early and I have farm duties to do every single day. And then I have farm duties to do in the, throughout the day or in the afternoon as well. And if it's lambing or calving season, it doesn't stop during that season. It's go, 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 go.
Well, I know your animals now, are a real therapy for you. My partner's with her horses every day up at 5, and that's her happy place. So I'm sure whatever's going on for you, once you're around those beings, things probably make a lot more sense.
Yeah, I love my animals, and they do take preference over me. I always tell people that they always come before me. I'll do everything for the animals before I look after myself. And I have people in my family as well. They say you shouldn't do that, Brooke. Like, you need to look after yourself. But it's just the way I am. It's just the way I am. So they do make me happy, but there's no lying that it is hard work. And as I said, there is no not doing it when you have animals, like with the horses. I don't have horses, but as you know, with the horses, you can't just not attend to them.
No.
It doesn't matter what the weather is, doesn't matter how you're feeling, if you're sick or you're sore or if you're tired, they have to be attended to. Doesn't matter if it's Christmas, if it's a weekend, they don't know. Yeah. They don't know when they don't care.
Seemingly that hard work DNA, you've found that, and it's such an attribute to your conviction that you're committed to making sure that you're showing up every day. And we were talking about before we started about that discipline, about how for some people near enough's good enough, but for some people no, it needs to be right past that. We talked about that critical eye. We'll always set very high standards for ourselves that we wish to achieve, even if sometimes they're unrealistic. It's part of that drive and determination. Just getting your thoughts around for a lot of people. I mean, obviously as an advocate, somebody who deals with a disability, and somebody who is, as a female doing all these incredible opportunities, where do you see a lot of people fall down or don't necessarily shore up some of those areas of life? Do you see any kind of pitfalls that people fall into?
I think one of the major issues with people, and not just women, and certainly not just people with disabilities, just in general, is that lack of self-belief and confidence in doing things. So I speak to people all the time about this, and they say, oh, I would like to do this, but I'm worried about if it doesn't work out, or I'm worried about what people will think of me. I'm worried that I might not be good at it. Yeah. And I say, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're not perfect at it. It doesn't it doesn't matter what other people think about it. And having those conversations with people, that's what I see a lot. And I'm not too sure why so many people lack
Yeah.
the confidence to go out and do things. And I'm not talking about huge things like, oh, I want to go out and start a big business or something. I'm talking about doing doing a particular hobby or taking up a new sport or something like that. Mm.
Yeah, getting on a stage and singing or stepping out of your comfort zone. It's interesting, those permissions.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a great kind of takeaway from what you've shared today about just having belief. And I guess if you don't step into those areas to give it a go, then it'll always be no, or you'll always miss out. Think what if.
Mm. Yeah,
No.
yeah. It's a lot of like, what if, and people. I say to people, well, rather than saying, oh, what if it doesn't work out? What if it goes bad? What if people don't like it? You can change that around and look at it, through a different lens, and say, well, what if it does work out?
Yeah.
What if I do enjoy it? What if I am okay? And also, well, what if they don't like it? What does that matter?
Yeah.
What actually comes from that? Well, nothing.
And then what's the takeaway, and what did I learn from those areas, isn't it? There's always sort of jewels of wisdom that come from, no mistakes, just lessons to learn from. So yeah,
Yeah.
great wisdom. So if people want to find you or get in contact with you, what's the best way for people to do so?
Oh, they can, through my social media. Yeah. So my Instagram is at outside with Brooke.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's generally the best way. I try my best to answer,
Amazing. Yeah.
see messages and answer, if I can. Yep. And my books are also available online through most of the major book retailers if they're interested in reading them.
Wonderful. And certainly look forward to seeing your books turn into something cinematic. That would be another amazing accomplishment to look forward to.
Oh, it would be amazing.
Brilliant. You can give yourself a little role or something in there, you can
There might be a little cameo. We could try. I don't think I'm a very good actor or actor, as they say, but we could try.
seemingly everything else you've put your talents to has paid off. So you never know, there could be some acting talents there, down the road. Amazing. Brooke, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate your shares and all the experiences that you've been through. You're incredibly courageous and inspiring.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. This is Brooke Strahan. This has been the Strong, Happy, Healthy Love podcast. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Let us know your thoughts or any future shows you'd like to see. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Be kind to yourself and others. And bye for now. Thanks again, Brooke.